striking things about the play is the decor. It's a family drama. It's very intimate. It's very intense. All sorts of amazing things happen to people. But the decor looks more like the set for a I don't know, a TV drama or a pop concert, or there's nothing intimate and family-like about the decor. So tell me how you came to this decision.
For me, when I read the book, it gave me a huge amount of images. I was completely involved in the situation. Everything is fine?
Yeah, everybody can hear you. Yeah.
So when you work in theater, you have to watch out that you don't compete with the reader that is in you. So from the beginning, I was thinking, how can I help the audience to have the same experience as what I had when I read the book? And in that sense, for me, the first thing I was thinking of was, how can all the visuals, the montage, how the dramaturgy of the book was constructed was very filmical. Do you say it in English, filmical? Sometimes my English isn't perfect, excuse me.
Well, you're from Belgium, that's okay.
I'm from Belgium, that's it. So I was searching for a way that I could help the audience to see those same images, and not by helping them by giving images, but mainly by the actors triggering the sound. So I hope that this performance, and therefore all the microphones on stage, that it can help construct you to see all the same images that I had when I was reading the work of A.M. Holmes. So in that sense, I hope that, and that's in all my work the case, that you have to find the artist in the spectator, and to help him see and get as close as possible to the content that I thought that was important in the book, and through those lines of sound and the ability of those amazing actors who trigger not only, they don't create only the characters on stage, they are also responsible of all the sounds, of all the light, of all the circumstances to help you make the movie in your mind. That's what was for me the case when I was reading the book. It was like a roller coaster of where you almost cannot breathe.
I'm curious, how many of you have seen the play already? Oh, good heavens! Well, we still have a spoiler alert on. Yeah. How many have read the book?
Wow!
This is a party of recognition. Wonderful. Yeah. Guy, I wondered when I saw the play whether the way you use technology, that you have to push a button to be connected with other people. To me, that seemed like a metaphor for the way the main character, Harry Silver, is sort of afloat in his own life, removed. It's like he's looking at his own life like, oh, did this happen to me?
When I look at the book and the main character, I saw a Bildungsroman. I don't know how you say it in English, a Bildungsroman, a novel of a person finding his identity, growing towards adulthood. The only thing in this book is that the age of the person is already
he's already married and has children when we arrive.
Yeah, children not really, but he finds children.
His brother's children
during the year we follow him, and for me it's a person who is very wise, very intelligent, but cannot find a position, cannot find a purpose in his life. And during the year, we follow him. He is being attacked from all sides, all different sides, in an emotional roller coaster. He finally, through a new family that happens to come together, that's not all through his decisions, and through, mainly for me, through the children, he finds a vision of how to deal with his life and how to grow up. Not like many of the other characters who are lost in a big society, wearing masks or hiding. Now I'm explaining. I think you can explain it much better.
We'll get to that later.
My apologies that I simplify too much. I can only talk out of my way how I was intrigued by your work, and and I must say that the whole company who was able to work, and that you gave us the possibility to work on your work, was for us an amazing voyage to deal with that material that shows for me in a very critical, ironical, but very human way how a big city is on the loose, and how finally one individual has a certain responsibility and can, even within the worst circumstances, can make something out of his life.
Mm.
And for me, that generosity where finally the book ends in, for me, was very important. After some other performances I made, that not always have such a nice point of view of how human behavior, what's inside human behavior.
So is Harry able to save himself? Can he start over?
He has his doubts, even in the end of the book, and at the same time, after following him for a whole year, I have the confidence he will, that he will find his purpose.
It sounds like you're fond of him.
I love him. Even though in the first 50 pages he doesn't show the best of himself. He has everything what a normal person shouldn't do. And at the same time, and I think that's also the force of the work of Holmes, is that even she doesn't glorify any of the characters, you understand them in their behavior,
We feel
and
empathy.
in their weaknesses.
Do we feel empathy?
I did. In sometimes not understanding in what situation you're in, and how to deal with things that come at you.
That happens to the best of us, doesn't it? Many of your plays have dealt with family situations and dramas. Last season you staged De Moed om te doden from Lars Noren, Bezonken Rood, based on the book by Jeroen Brouwers, Atropa, Hamlet versus Hamlet. All of these are family dramas, if not even family tragedies. Is the family thing something that really gets under your skin, Guy?
Oh, yeah, I think, yeah.
Apparently.
Family, it's through the performances you make that you start to realize what you have to deal with. For sure, family is a very important element, but mainly why I choose specific performances is not really that the theme family is so important. It's mainly that I also, like this character, is a person who doesn't understand the situation he's in. But through wonderful sentences, he explains that difficulty. And for me, that's the quality of the novels I've been recreating on stage is mainly, if you look at Proust, if you look at Musil, all the main characters are people not having grip on reality, on the situation they're dealing with. But at the same time, their doubts are explained in such beautiful language that I can feel related to. So mainly for me, the place of the outsider is a very important theme, and sharing from a distance. Sometimes you get a clearer view on your surroundings, on what's happening in society.
My final question. A.M. Holmes is an American writer. This is an American story. Is this something, a particularly American situation, this feeling of footloose and unattached and
as a European, we like to
think that? Okay.
And I'm afraid it tells us always what's coming to us quite soon. So I think we can learn a lot from their experiences and learn from it for ourselves. I must say that in American literature, for me, the work is leading us to see how Europe functions. In that sense, it's easy for us to say how crazy America is. I'm at the same time.
Dat heb je mij niet horen zeggen.
No, for me, it's the way how I live when I read the book, how I live Harold's life myself, shows that it's not about America at all, but that it's about every society, that
human beings,
and how today we change our way of communication with each other. Half of the book, and maybe I exaggerate a little bit, is based on indirect communication, based on phone calls, based on through Skype connections. That we lose the physical contact with each other, and that was something to bring back the technical aspect of the performance that I wanted to keep. That it's not what you see on stage is a direct imitation of life. No, it's the more and more we don't look each other in the eye anymore because we are afraid of it. And I think that's what a beautiful voyage you get when you read the book, is that finally, even when the people sitting with the last Thanksgiving in the book around the table, it's people who maybe don't know each other that well, but look each other in the eyes.
Yeah.
And that's the quality of theater again, that there you face each other physically in the eyes. Yeah. So in that sense, it's
so
normal that the actors are almost for 80% of the performance are looking straight in the audience and have direct contact with you as a spectator.
Mm-hmm. That's why I'm so glad that you're physically here next to me. Thank you for joining us, Guy Cassiers.
Thank you.
Now I would like to give the stage to Elko. You all have the text with you. The idea is not that you sing along, but that you read along so that you know the English text to the Dutch play.
Yeah, okay.
rather?
No.
Whichever.
I don't prefer anything.
Whatever
Mijn recept voor rampspoed? Thanksgiving, vorig jaar bij mijn broer George, zijn vrouw Jane en hun 2 kinderen, Nate en Ashley. Die lompe kalkoen midden op de feesttafel en iedereen zich maar volstoppen met de taaie reep droog vlees van het domme dier. George voorop, kalkoen tot boven zijn nek, sloten jus die over zijn kin liepen en ik mij heen en weer lopen tussen de tafel en de keuken met schotels vol rommel die nu eenmaal bij Thanksgiving eten past. Plakkerige cranberry saus, wakke kroketjes, koude zilveruitjes, dat soort rommel allemaal. En vingers die nu nog plakkerig zijn van het kraakbeen van dat domme dier. En als ik ergens een hekel aan heb, dan is het aan plakkerige vingers. Bij iedere trip van de keuken naar de tafel en vice versa, haatte ik George meer en meer. Alle zonden uit onze jeugd kwamen me dan voor de geest dansen, om te beginnen bij zijn geboorte. Hij kwam 11 maanden na mij ter wereld en hij was meteen zwak, ziekelijk en zielig. Zuurstoftekort bij de bevalling, zei de dokter. Mijn moeder ging zich meteen schuldig voelen en ieder mogelijk tekort aan zuurstof compenseren en teveel aan liefde. Mijn wormpje noemde ze hem. Hij zag er niet uit. Een worm, ja. Een mensje dat op een worm leek en daarom al vanaf het begin altijd te veel aandacht kreeg. Maar ik heb het nooit verborgen gehouden dat ik hem niet kon uitstaan. Ik heb hem meer dan eens gezegd dat ik hem in alle objectiviteit lelijk vond. Van binnen en van buiten. Niet één keer heb ik het niet zo gezegd dat het aanhoren waard was. Laat staan dat hij een originele gedachten zou hebben geformuleerd. En één ding moet ik toegeven. Tegen de tijd dat we 10 en 11 waren was hij een stuk langer dan ik. En breder en sterker. Daarom speelde hij ook altijd en overal de baas over alles en iedereen. Dus ook met Thanksgiving. Hij had het te druk met bluffen tegen zijn vrouwen, tegen zijn kinderen en tegen zijn zogenaamde vrienden. Die ook zijn werknemers waren. Nieuwslezers, weervrouwen, uitschot van de tv. Claire, mijn vrouw, die van Chinees-Amerikaanse komaf die lust geen Thanksgiving eten. Bij hen eten ze dan geroosterde eend met kleefrijst, zegt ze. Ieder jaar. Maar mij helpen afruimen? Nee, dat deed ze net zo min als de nieuwslezers en de weervrouwen van George TV-station. Jane, George, bevallige vrouw die de hele dag in de keuken aan de maaltijd gewerkt had, kwam me op de duur wel een handje toesteken. Zo stond ik in de keuken van mijn broer aan het karkas van die kalkoen te plukken, terwijl mijn schoonzus Jane met lichtblauwe werkhandschoenen aan het afwassen was, tot haar ellebogen in het zeepsel. Ik zat met mijn vingers diep in de vogel, wiens holle lichaam nog warm was. Lekker stukjes vulling zaten binnenin. Ik voelde met mijn vingers en ik bracht de vulling naar mijn lippen. Jane keek me aan. Mijn mond was vettig en vochtig en ik wreef over wat beslist de G-spot van de kalkoen moest zijn. Als kalkoenen een G-spot hadden. Toen haalde Jane haar handen uit het water. Ze kwam naar me toe. En ze gaf me een kus. Geen vriendschappelijk zoentje, een serieuze kus. Nat. Vol verlangen. Schrikwekkend en onverwacht. Toen trok ze met een kletsend geluid haar handschoenen uit en ze liep de kamer in. Ik hield mij met mijn vette vingers aan het aanrecht vast. Hard. Het dessert werd op tafel gezet. Jane vroeg wie nog koffie wilde en ze kwam de keuken erin. Ik volgde haar als een hond. Ik wilde meer. Zij negeerde me. Van Thanksgiving tot Kerstmis tot in het nieuwe jaar kon ik aan niks anders denken dan aan George die Jane neukte. Ik moest er voortdurend aan denken. Zodra ik Jane zag werd ik stijf. Ik droeg ruimvallende broeken, die 2 onderbroeken over elkaar om mijn verraderlijke enthousiasme te verbergen. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It's a great honor for me to be the moderator tonight, because A.M. Holmes is the writer of 2 of my all-time favorite novels, May We Be Forgiven, and this book will save your life. When I read May We Be Forgiven, it blew me away. The pace of the story, the unsettling and surprising events, all these bizarre and dark situations, but above all, the great humor. It really stands out for me, the humor. I had to laugh out loud many, many times, and that rarely happened before while reading. And the title became this mantra in my head, May We Be Forgiven. And then I read This Book Will Save Your Life. And the same thing happened. I fell in love with the book, and I sometimes still miss the atmosphere of it. I miss the characters, and I then, for some strange reason, long for donuts. A.M. Holmes inspired me a lot as a writer. It was so liberating for me to see a writer at work breaking rules, writing with so much pace and confidence, with such a powerful voice, and again, with great humor. She changed the way I look at writing, and I think that shows in my second novel, which not only has an imperative title, like Holmes' last novel, but also contains humor and absurd situations, which is new in my work. Holmes is the writer of 6 novels, a beautiful memoir, 2 books of short stories, a travel memoir, and an artist book. She has published in the New Yorker, Harper, New York Times, Vanity Fair, and many other magazines. She has also created original television pilots and was a writer and producer of the Showtime series The L Word. She teaches creative writing at Princeton, and her work has been translated in more than 22 countries. In 2013, Holmes won the prestigious Libris Prize for Fiction. Please welcome A.M. Holmes.
Thank you very much. I feel like I'm hallucinating. Is this my funeral? I'm just kidding. I've never heard such nice things. No, yeah.
Well, hi AM.
Hello, everybody.
It's so nice,
Hello, everybody.
so nice to have you here.
I'm
It's
so
a great
happy
honor.
to be here.
Yes.
I was here 1,000,000 years ago as a child at the John Adams Institute. I was
Yeah.
born here. No, I wasn't born. Yeah.
So how is it to be back in Amsterdam?
Oh, it's amazing, and I mean, the whole thing is amazing. I mean, besides the fact, as you all know, it's an incredibly beautiful city. And I mean, I grew up in Washington, but I'm a New Yorker. I've been in New York, so to be where New York came from, literally, it's just incredible. And to see Guy's play and Ilko, I mean, it is like a hallucination because these things live in your head for years, and then to see them become three-dimensional and other people's sort of iterations of them, it's astounding.
Yes. So yesterday you went to the play,
I did.
Vergeven ons.
Yes.
So how was it to see the play based on your last novel?
It's just, I mean, we were talking last night about there's ways in which it's a little bit like a Bergman film, and ways in which also Guy has had to make these decisions about what to keep in and what to leave out, and the sort of the editing. And I think you were asking about the staging of it, and I think that the staging of it captures something that is very much about America at the turn of the 21st century, and that real sort of the impact of technology, and that we are living in this very visual time, and I'm a very visual thinker, and it's really on the actors to inhabit these characters. So I was astounded. I mean, I'm blown away by it.
Wow.
I want to see it again, though, and again.
Wow. It had subtitles, right, for you to be able to follow it?
Well, I had already watched it, the original, what's it called? They filmed the performance in Antwerp because I couldn't go.
Oh.
And so I watched it, and it's amazing to me too how well I can follow it. Even I got embarrassed when you were reading that part just now, or performing that part. I'm like, oh my God, I know what's coming. So yeah, it's just incredible.
But how do you look at the play? As something separate from your work, or as a new form for your novel? How is it to?
That's a good question. I don't know yet. I mean, I think what I love is when somebody takes something that I make and then makes something entirely their own out of it. And as much as it is the companies in Guy's own work, there are also these moments in there where, look, I still have a BlackBerry, and there's a line in there about this guy, an awful person smashing his BlackBerry. And I have smashed a lot of BlackBerries. And the last BlackBerry I smashed was actually in Amsterdam during Hurricane Sandy in New York. I was like, God,
Wow.
And I thought, oh my God, am I the bad guy in this book? I have this horrible flashback. And then there's moments where there's a photo of a Hershey's bar with almonds, which is what my grandmother used to give us, like as a gift. I thought, there's the Hershey bar. And I would say it's funny, because I would never normally say this. The book is very much not autobiographical. I'm not Harry, I'm not George, I'm not Jane, and yet last night I became aware of how much of me is in the book, which I'd never honestly been willing to admit. So I think he did more than a me. He did like a
But how much
like a
of you...
psychiatric job. He's like
So
my analyst
It was a
now.
discovery for you, but how much of yourself is in the book then?
Apparently a lot, for better or worse. And my mother used to say funny things too. Like she would say very early on when I would write things, she'd say, "I know where that sandwich comes from," because I would, it would be fiction, but I'd be adding things that I cared about, apparently, like sandwiches or foods. And then somebody else in England sent me a letter once and said, "We went through all of your books and we found 19 Valium and a whole lot of Diet Coke." And I thought, and some of it is the signatures of what you do in your writing, but some of it must be me.
Yeah. So let's go back to the very beginning of the novel. You got a request from Zadie Smith.
It's all her
That's
fault.
where it all
Yes.
began, yeah.
Yeah.
How did it go? Can you tell us
Well,
about it?
Zadie said, "Can you write a short story for an anthology I'm doing?" So it was a benefit anthology. I thought that's a lovely idea. And it should be really focused on characters. And I've been thinking about brothers. And weirdly, if you knew me at all, you would know. I've been thinking peculiarly about John Cheever and his brother, who had a very complicated relationship, and I'm a big fan of John Cheever. And the notion of brothers even came in a little bit in This Book Will Save Your Life. There's a brother who almost won a Nobel Prize. Is that in that book? There's a sort of a hostile brother thing. So it had been on my mind for a while, and then I started doing all this research, and I started writing the story, and then the deadline for the story came and went, and still writing.
You kept on writing.
Kept on writing, and then there was this terrible moment. I kept thinking, well, I knew that it was no longer a short story. I kept thinking, why is this taking so long? Because years were passing, and I didn't realize how long the book was getting. And then I realized I was writing a novel with the compression of a short story, which is the roller coaster. And then two things happened. One, when I turned it in, the editor said, "I think you have to add more." Because I thought I was basically going to die before I finished it. And he said, "I think the ending, you sort of cheated it a little and you have to go back in." And so I thought, okay, I'll go back. And I did that. And then the other thing he said is, he goes, "And I noticed there's no chapters and there's no space breaks." And I thought, oh my God, I forgot. Because I really just was thinking about this story driving forward. So we put in, I keep joking, are like bathroom breaks. Like you could just put it down for a minute and go away. Exactly. It's the only novel with bathroom breaks in it. And on a more literary level, chapters actually have shapes. Chapters have their own structure, beginning and middle and end. It's not like you could take a 700-page manuscript and start making chapters out of it. So.
Yeah. And the result is like a Cain and Abel-like story, a big American book with many events.
Yeah. No, I wanted to write a big American book. Yeah. I think that, for better or worse, I think of myself as a very American writer, which is becoming increasingly a problem. But I'll take care of it.
Yeah. And you said it yourself, it's like a roller coaster, the novel.
Well, it's hard when you kill somebody's wife right there. Well, two people haven't read it, but when you kill somebody in the first 30 pages, that's not how you start a book usually. It's how you end something. So then the question becomes, on a theatrical level and a storytelling level, where do you go from there?
Yeah. And the reader has to gasp for air.
Yes, we all do.
I was wondering, the way you wrote it, is it also a comment on the speed of life in modern society?
Well, I think there's definitely an awareness of I would say the compression of everyday life. And I think in the play you see that too, and also in the sort of the jump cuts and the way that all of us now, our days are so interrupted by so many things. And we talk a good game about multitasking and ADD and just going insane. But it's the question is it sustainable and how much faster can we go? Because it also relates to productivity. Like I have friends who are architects, and they used to say, your client would call and say, "Have you finished the drawings?" And you would lie and say, "Yes, I'm putting them in the mail. They went in the mail on Wednesday." and the person would have to wait till they arrived. And then it sped up to, have you finished the drawings? And they would say, yes, I'll fax them to you later. And now it's like, you have like 5 seconds to get the drawings to the person. And so there is that sense of that everything is supposed to happen also at this accelerated rate, which I think the bigger piece of for me is that it leaves the human out of it. That there are ways in which we are technologically capable of great speed, but we are not humanly or psychologically in that same place.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's sort of one of the things I'm getting at.
And the last 10 or 15 years, it has gone worse. I mean,
It's gone,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
And so, is it correct to say that your last 2 novels are also a comment on the American dream? And is that the reason why you destroy houses in your novels?
Well, you know, I'm very interested in even, the important thing about the American dream is we've forgotten one key word, dream. So it was meant to be the American fantasy and the American sort of idea and this aspiration, and then it turned into the notion of sort of the American entitlement, like, well, where's my house? Where's my kids? Where's my car?
Yeah.
Where's my boat? Where's my, you know, and then we had this whole sort of, you know, exactly. But then there was also, it escalated into an economic situation where people also put themselves in peril to achieve this thing. So I think those ideas which really come out of a post-war America need a revisiting in a very substantial way. That's just about what does it mean, and even right now the question, what does it mean to be American?
Yeah, and
You know, we've stopped talking about it basically. We're like,
but still, what strikes me is that all Americans seem to believe in the dream. And even if you have a homeless person and he will say, I'm going to make it one day. Is that the DNA of the American dream, or is it a facade?
I don't know. I think it might be almost like a kind of salesmanship that somebody did at some point that hasn't worn off yet. I mean, I think it's really an interesting thing because I think people come from all over the world and to migrate to America and to other countries with the hope of a better life or a better situation. And the American dream has not grown to accommodate the larger world that we're living in. And I think that's the interesting, there's a real split, and also that sense of America's need to sort of protect themselves as individuals, which is not a very patriotic idea.
Yeah.
You know, me first, me only, just me, you know, me again.
Yeah. Me. Yeah.
Those were going to be the sequels to the John Updike books, but he...
There's also a lot of technology in your novel.
Yeah.
Guy mentioned it, and these days it's even more present in daily life. It's like people lead second lives on
Right.
social media,
Right.
and they present a different version of themselves. There's a fraction of identity.
Mm-hmm.
You could say, yeah. And how do you look at that?
Well, that was a really important and hard choice for me, because theoretically I don't believe in putting things like technology in fiction, because I think when you write too specifically about a time and place, you also immediately date things.
Exactly.
But I was very aware of how we're at such a pivotal moment and where technology has changed how we're behaving. And the bottom line is I'm fascinated by human behavior, which is why it super thrills me when my books come out in lots of other languages, that they find resonance, because it's really about who we are and how we are, and not just about what it is to be an American. But in this case, I felt like it was really important to sort of acknowledge and explore the impact of that technology on people. And the other core thing that's in all the books is always the split between our public and private selves. So there is this part where people are playing at other versions of themselves online or in these sort of avatar personalities. And so I wanted to begin to describe that, and also the hazards of it.
Yeah.
You know.
Because who are we in the end? I mean.
Well, and also if you fracture off part of yourself and sort of dissociate in the sort of psychological terms, then you also, I think, sort of lose your integrity as a whole person, and then you behave also in worrisome ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we also have Facebook. It's even influencing elections and democracy.
Yeah.
Isn't Facebook too powerful, you think? And they also own Instagram and WhatsApp.
Right.
It seems dangerous. And do you think Zuckerberg should be imprisoned?
Well, thank you for that question. I didn't know. I think what's interesting about it is the way that almost things like Facebook, Instagram, all of that stuff, and Amazon have become almost like a utility company. It's almost like the electric company or the train. Like it's the thing that we just do and we assume is there for everybody. And not nobody, but until recently, I don't think there was an active consciousness about what was behind the screen.
Right,
There was
right.
not really an awareness of what it meant that you're giving them all this information, or beyond the sort of amusement that the shoes that you looked at this morning on one channel, are now showing up on your other channel, and you think, wow, they know me so well, isn't that lovely? But I don't think there was a consciousness about what it might mean to be known in those ways. And it's absolutely worrisome. But also like riveting, I assume at this point everybody knows everything, and basically we're just walking X-rays. It's like, oh, you see my movie, yeah.
Google knows everything, and LinkedIn probably.
Yes.
So there's a lot of websites that know us very well.
Well, and also what's interesting to me is the way that, in theory, you can choose to opt out and not participate, and that's also to me just super interesting. In fact, I know what happened. I was coming here yesterday, so flying to Amsterdam, I was in the airport. This is one of those scary examples. And I thought, you have to tell your credit card that you're going away so they don't turn off your credit card when you land, basically. So I called the credit card company. I'm literally about to board the plane. I said, hi, I'm just calling to let you know I'm going to Amsterdam. And they go, oh, we know that. I'm not kidding. And I said to them, as they're boarding group number 2 boarding, and they're like, what do you mean you know that? And they go, we already have that in our record.
Oh, wow.
I've never, and then they said, did you buy your ticket on American Airlines? I'm like, I'm flying Delta. And this was an American Airlines credit card. And they go, oh, well, sometimes they tell us things. Totally seriously. And I'm just like, that was TMI for me. I changed the ticket. I'm not going now.
Cancel the
I'm
trip.
going somewhere else. You'll never find me till tomorrow. No. But that's really kind of intense. I mean, it's like, hi. Hi there, Ms. Holmes. We see you're standing in line at the airport now.
It's scary.
It's very scary. Yeah.
So, what does forgiveness mean to you?
Everything. I think
Okay, next question.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think forgiveness is really, really important. And in the biggest sense, too, a therapist once told me, I've only been in therapy since 4th grade, but I think I'm getting there. At some point, I don't know, and I feel like maybe I do stand-up comedy, and then the therapist talks about, when you're feeling funny, it's always an interesting moment. I'm like, anyway. But the notion of forgiveness and the idea that you can forgive somebody or something, but not dismiss it, is a huge thing. So what is it? Because I feel like, and this is part of what's in the book, is if you hold on to anger or resentment, it doesn't stop the other people, it stops you. You're holding on, you're busy, like, I'm carrying this thing around, I can't move. But if you can let go of that thing and live your life, it doesn't mean that you forget it or you put it away, you just have to not be crippled by it. So there's a piece in me that's sort of, not even a piece, kind of a Buddhist, I work very hard at these ideas. And I think they're interesting and important, and more in the global sense too.
Yeah. Well, I did some research, of course, and you said something about Yom Kippur, which I really liked. And
Sure.
you said you're asking not just forgiveness for what you have done, but also for what you might have done, and for what you didn't even know you did.
That's correct.
And it shouldn't be just once a year, wake up, be aware, be mindful of how you move through the world. And I really like that. Be aware.
Thank you. I mean, it's interesting because the new book that's coming out is called Days of Awe, and that's the 10 days between the Jewish holidays of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And I grew up in a Jewish family, but I'm English, Irish, Russian, and German, half Jewish and half Catholic. And I somehow have become the most religious person in this otherwise really non-religious family. But I'm interested in not Judaism per se, but in the importance of a spiritual life and about thinking about whether it's Buddhist ideas or ideas of belief and forgiveness and all those things. And I think it is really important to think about what you might do and the ways you might, and my characters are always hurting people terribly. But I think we all hurt each other,
Everyone is flawed.
Yeah. So I just, I'm obsessed by human behavior.
It's a good thing as a writer.
It's good.
The great American novel, next subject. For me, your last two novels are great American novels,
Yeah.
and much more than, for example, Jonathan Franzen's novels.
Thank you.
I must say, to be honest. I know Franzen was your classmate, so I'll be a little careful, but I have to say, I don't get the excitement surrounding him. I'm not saying he's overrated, but because I mean he's great, but I do think his essays are better. Franzen's essays. Oh, okay, thank you. I put his novel Freedom aside a couple of times, and for me, your novels are much more inviting. So, but the reason I'm saying this is that there's this thing about the great American novel, and for some reason, people seem to think that it should be written by a male writer.
Well, yeah,
And,
I wasn't going to be the one to say that.
What do you think? And were you thinking about writing a great American novel?
I would say I'm always just thinking about just writing a book. So, I think that what you're getting at is very interesting, and there is this notion of the great American man novel or something. It's years ago I had this wonderful writer, Grace Paley, as a teacher, and Grace talked about how the expectation was that women wrote about domestic things and men wrote about large social issues. So I think, I feel like in the rest of Europe there's wonderful women writers writing about all kinds of things and history and enormous scale, but somehow in America there is still this notion that is, the purview of Jonathan. Anybody named Jonathan is the first part. So if your name is Jonathan, you're fine. Norman is a good, Philip. There's a few like classic names that get to write these books.
Yeah.
There's my name is really Amy. There's never an Amy, okay? There's not an AM. There's not even a JD really doing that.
But you're the first then. First women writing a great American novel, or aren't you?
That would be lovely. I think great American novel just is supposed to be big. The big American novel.
Big, yeah.
Yeah. No, I would say in the all seriousness, it is very important to me to write about. I keep going like making gestures, the larger sort of social and political issues, and yet to do that within the domestic framework and with a kind of humanity, which is what he was talking about. And I think I love all of the Jonathans, but I think what's sometimes missing is the truly human and the failed and the sort of kind of vulnerability that maybe sometimes my characters have because I'm more willing to sort of let that out there.
Yeah, yeah. And the humor.
Humor.
That's
very important to me.
Very Holmes. So, yeah.
Yes.
Is there a difference in the way your work has been reviewed in Europe compared to the US?
I would say it's been probably better reviewed in Europe than in the US. And I think there's a couple of things at play. One is that there is this thing where, it's a book by a woman, we better give it to this other woman to write review, which is a little weird. It's like, she wrote cookbooks, that's okay, it'll be fine, there's food in that book. I wish I was kidding. So there's that aspect, which is a problem. And I think there's also a difficulty where it's because I am really reflecting the American portrait at the current moment, people can't decide, is she making fun of us? Is she celebrating us?
Yeah.
Or all of the above, and that's, I think Americans don't have a lot of perspective on themselves. So they're not quite sure how to read the books. And then they say things, like, I'll meet a guy and we're talking, I'm a writer, whatever, and he goes, my wife's the reader. I'm like, I always say things like, I think you'd like this book too. It's about brothers, and I always look at that. So the expectation too is that if you're a woman writer, you must be writing for women to read, and I find that just beyond annoying because I'm writing for everybody to read.
Of course, yeah. And you once said that you get your worst reviews by women reviewing you. Why is that? You think?
Because my recipes are terrible. The proportions are all wrong. Baking soda, baking powder, who knows the difference?
But they feel you criticize them? Is that the reason?
I'd have to ask them or something, which would be really embarrassing. Why'd you write that bad review? I'm a nice person. No, I don't know. And I would say I don't care, which isn't true. I care enormously, and I have to say it's always meant more to me to see my books come out in other languages in other countries, because I think, wow, that's impressive, that what I'm talking about has resonance, finds its way into other, in Korea with like a free donut coupon on the back of the book. And I was like, that's so cool. The Asian's like, that's not a good idea. it makes me sad that sometimes in America people don't get it, but I also, I can't fix that, you know? I can just keep going.
Yeah. So when I mentioned the name Michiko Kakutani, what
She's
do you say?
retired.
Exactly. I was going to say that, yeah. So that's a relief,
Yeah.
right? Did she stop reviewing?
She was like the top book critic at the New York Times, and I would say, to say she hated me was to be generous.
Wow.
I used to get, I'm not joking, like condolence calls, like literally, I probably shouldn't say this at the lovely John Adams Institute, but John Waters, the filmmaker, there was a big bad review of one of my novels, and John leaves me a message, he goes, fuck her, and just hangs up the phone. And even like, you know, all kinds of writers would call, like, I'm really sorry about Michiko's review today. And the thing that was interesting to me about it is sometimes the reviews of my books are very emotional, which means to me that it hit a nerve for the reviewer. And at one point, the publisher said, what do we do with these reviews? And I said, use them. That a negative review in juxtaposition with a positive review is an interesting comment. I don't think everybody has to love what I'm writing. It's not necessarily lovable always. And I think that's an important thing. Like, when you just look back in time, people didn't go, Crime and Punishment, God, I love that guy. Like, I want to, there's this weird thing about likability, which is a very modern American idea. Did you like the character? Like when you talk about Harold Silver, people would say to me, am I supposed to like him? And I thought, I don't know. Like, you just read the book and live with him. You know, that's a super contemporary idea. So I want people to be affected by them, but whether or not they like them, I'm not.
You don't care about that?
I don't want to say I don't care, because that would be.
No.
But.
Just read the story.
Yeah.
Okay. You get this question a lot, but still, I will ask it. You write from the male perspective.
Sometimes.
Yeah, a lot.
Yes, okay.
Your last two novels, for example.
Yeah.
And do it really well.
Thank you.
But how come you're so comfortable with that perspective?
No, I think there's something about, I mean, I really am a fiction writer, and I know a lot of people who are fiction writers who write very autobiographically. And except for like the Hershey bars and the Blackberry and stuff, these stories are really made up. And I find that inhabiting somebody emotionally and physically so different from myself is in a way much easier and much more liberating and fun. I have to say there's nothing to me, this sounds awful, I have no interest in writing like a middle-aged woman like myself. I think, I don't want to write that. Maybe because I know it and I'm living it. But, and that's why I love men. I mean, I really do. I just find, all my friends are all men. I don't know.
Somewhere you said in an interview that you would write much meaner if you wrote from the women perspective or the female perspective.
I don't know if that's true. I just think it doesn't resonate for me in the same way. And it also is interesting, you could look at it super psychologically and say, you know, who were the writers that I grew up reading and who are my role models? And my role models were Edward Albee, Harold Pinter, John Cheever, Richard Yates, which is probably a problem right there. I mean, you know, no, seriously, if you think about, there weren't women writers, at least well-known or publishing. We need a doctor, I think.
Is there a doctor here? Oh. Is there a doctor in the room? Maybe it's a bit hot, I don't know.
Yeah.
Just hold
Give him a hold, yeah.
It's a bit hot, yeah. It's warm inside, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
It is.
Is everybody else good?
Is everyone okay? Can we open a window somewhere? Or air conditioning. Yeah.
They're secured.
And they're in air conditioning.
Seems to be locked, the windows. Okay. So, just wait. Doors are open. Someone's coming to open the window.
Fantastic.
Shall we wait? I'm not sure. Continue. Oh, we have water. Do you want water?
I'm okay, but thank you. Would anyone else like some water?
Just to be sure.
This
Yeah.
gentleman, perhaps?
We have water and a candle. Does anyone need a candle? I could tell you a funny story quickly. I promise that the
Feel free. Yes.
I will. So when I was writing the last book, and some of you may have already heard this, it took forever to write, so I stopped and took a course in stand-up comedy, which was probably not a good idea. And then while I was on book tour for the book, I would be reading from the book or giving these performances, and every now and then you'd stumble over a few words, and I would digress. I would just stop and digress into some weird stand-up comedy thing. And people would think I had lost my mind. But apropos of this gentleman fainting, last weekend in my apartment building, my daughter we have a 15-year-old daughter, was walking the dogs, and as she was coming back in with the dogs, a very pregnant woman was coming out of the elevator. And as she was approaching her, the woman said, "I'm having the baby now." And the husband said, no, we're the car's outside, we're going to the hospital. Just, the baby is coming out now. And then literally, as my daughter described it, you could see the baby's head appearing in her sweatpants. Absolutely. So this woman, and some of you will figure out who this story belongs to, but the baby was born in the lobby of our building, which only in one of my stories probably would that happen.
Exactly.
Literally on a space about this big, just the baby comes out in New York City. Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah. And
Seth Meyers' baby.
It was Seth Meyers' baby. Yes, Seth Meyers had his baby in front of my daughter, which was really, she's a little young. And but anyway, everyone's feeling better now, which I just hopefully that's the segue back into the yes. So.
You won the Women's Prize for Fiction in 2013.
The 1 year it was the Women's Prize, I did.
The name has changed, right?
Yes, it was the Orange Prize, and it was the Women's Prize for my year, then the Bailey's Prize, and now I think it's just called the Really Good Prize for Women for Fiction.
The best prize there is.
The best prize, yes.
But you had to compete with the biggest names. I mean, Zadie Smith, Kate Atkinson, Hilary Mantel.
Yeah, that was rough.
It must have felt great to beat Mantel, right?
No, you know what was amazing though, I have to say, because you think of the Women's Prize for Fiction, which was founded probably now about 20 years ago by a group of women writers, including Angela Carter, who I'd had the wonderful chance to have her as a teacher, but it was founded as a response to the Booker Prize, because the Booker really hadn't had any women win it, and so this group of women together founded this thing, and then there's my novel that's horrible to women, really. This woman is killed by her husband in the first 20 pages. Her brother's wife sleeps with her, and I still won the prize. And I thought, that's dedication. But no, it also gets to the idea that women can write, larger books and about big ideas, and it doesn't just have to be like a cookbook to win a prize. So it meant, yes, all that to say, it meant an enormous amount to me.
I can imagine.
It was like a wonderful sort of international vote of confidence.
Yeah. How was the news received in the U.S.?
I don't think it made it to the U.S.
No? Come on.
No,
New York Times?
not so much. No, it's like, that's the funny thing. It's like, it was like yelling across the ocean, "We won a prize!" And they went something like, what? It was very, and also, it's terrible to say. I mean, America has gotten very deaf to the rest of the world. It's just, it's very, very America-centric. In fact, when they first were writing about doing the play, the agents and all the people who represent me were like, we don't know what this is. I'm like, what do you mean you don't know what it is? It says Dutch Theater Company wants to do play. And they were like, yeah, we don't know what that is. I never even told you this. And I said, I think it's a good idea. And they were like, it can't happen. And I just said, but for like months, and I was like, could somebody get on this and figure this out? But there was really just, and not even like an actual resistance, just obliviousness. And it was shocking to me, And then when I finally said, they finally send the flyer, it's actually happening. I'm like, see? And they're like, oh, that's so cool.
And now you're here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Wow. Your last two novels are different from your other work. they're optimistic in a way.
Yeah.
And you said in an interview that 9/11 influenced your writing. Could you explain that?
Sure. So I was home in New York the day 9/11 happened, and I lived downtown. And I'd actually gotten this incredible fellowship to the New York Public Library, and I was supposed to be going uptown. And as somebody who's worked at home forever, I was running late because it's hard to go to work when you never go to work. And so I happened to be there, and a friend called and said that a plane, thinking it was a small plane, had hit the World Trade Center. And I looked out the window and actually saw the second plane come in. I saw the whole thing happen. And it was the first time in my life I had to think about, how do you go into your imagination when the world around you is not steady? That we depend as artists and writers on sort of terra firma in order to go into the imagination. So that was thing one that was very complicated. And then I also thought, how do you sort of write in the time that we're living in? And it was important to me to try to figure out how to be not falsely optimistic, but even in this book, there was a part where I thought, this is not going to end well. Like Harold's, he's going downhill. And I thought, well, what will it take? And it's very important that it be organically from within the character for there to be a change in him. How does that kind of change happen? And so that was a lot of the work of it, was trying to sort of help Harold grow up. Which sounds really funny because they do become very real, three-dimensional people. So that for me has been interesting. When you're living in a time that's not inherently optimistic, how do you write at least somewhat optimistically about life?
Yeah. You said somewhere, I want to push back against the pessimism. I can't bear to accept that everything is basically going to shit. It sounds like a mission for you. Push back, pessimism.
I think I less feel like I'm somebody who's pushing back. I feel like I'm just trying to swim through, whatever the currents are, and hopefully not just like around the Hudson River, literally Henry Hudson, the river, Mm-hmm. I want to get outside of my own river. Yeah.
This book will save your life.
Yeah.
I have to be honest, I had to get used to the title after Maybe We've Written, which was a mantra in my head.
Right.
And also I heard that your publisher had the same thing. He or she had to get used to the title.
Of which one?
Of This Book Will Save Your Life, yeah.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Oh, yeah, well, I read it somewhere. But
I'll find out.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
But what's up with the title?
I know.
Where did it come from?
Titles?
Yeah.
Well, I know that May We Be Forgiven just seemed obvious. Like, May We Be Forgiven. Like, there's so many
but that's
things
brilliant. I
that we
love
should
it.
be forgiven
Yeah.
for. Thank you. This Book Will Save Your Life was more desperation. I thought, this book better save my life. And then it just seemed like an interesting, odd thing. And then people would say to me, will it? I'm like, I don't know, it's not a self-help book. But the notion of what the characters are trying to deal with, I thought was interesting. So I don't have a good excuse. My grandmother, who's now dead, asked me 1,000,000 years ago, when my second book was called The Safety of Objects. She goes, what does that mean, the safety of objects? And I had to say, well, it's consumerist culture, and there's these things that we hang on to. I don't know. It's the titling business is different.
But the main character, Richard Novak, is a really helpful guy, and this guy will save your life.
But he also had to save his own life, and it was by saving. I think a lot, and this is definitely a post 9/11 thing for me. I think a lot about our responsibility to each other and not just to ourselves, and that's the big thing. And this book will save your life. Is Richard Novak realizing that by taking care of or helping other people or just showing up for them, he actually is helping himself enormously. Yeah. So I think about that a lot.
Your new book is coming out in June. It's a collection of short stories, Days of Awe. Can you tell something about it?
Let's see. This is the first time I've had to talk about it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'm not ready. What can I tell you about it? I think that it's 30 years since I wrote The Safety of Objects, which is, I'm not that old. I couldn't have done that. Somebody else did it, it turns out. No, so there's stories in the new book that literally have picking up characters who I created literally as a teenager. So there's that in there. And then there's stories like the story Days of Awe, which is interesting. It's about these people at a genocide conference who hook up, which is the modern and the not modern at all. And what's interesting about it, like yesterday in the New York Times, there was an article about people's awareness of the Holocaust, and that millennials, which I'm never quite sure how old a millennial is, it sounds also like a kind of cookie I like a Milano. There's lots of Milanos out there. But that only 60 or something like 66% of millennials don't know what Auschwitz was, and that 44% think 2 million people died in World War II. So it's interesting to me because there's several of the stories in the book that are about sort of generational memory and trauma and the way stories are passed down. And also there's one, it was the last story I finished, so it's fairly recent, like very recent, called The National Cage Bird Show. That was my writing a sort of literary response to J.D. Salinger's For Esme with Love and Squalor, which some of you remember, where it's about a soldier at war. And I can't help but be constantly thinking about how the implements of war have changed. We have drones, we have these things, we can have wars from computers, thousands of miles away, but the human cost of war doesn't change. And that interests me and worries me a lot. So I'm looking at, again, big ideas, and the human relationship to these things.
Yeah. Looking forward.
Thank you.
Yeah. Are you also working on a new novel?
I am.
You are, yeah.
Yes. It's about the downfall of the U.S. government. I know. When I started a couple years ago, they're like, telling the publishers, and they're like, that sounds like science fiction. You don't really write science fiction. And I sort of stopped doing it. And I had this feeling of something's bothering me. Something's not right. And there you go. Yeah. Now I just have to finish it in time.
Before 2020 or what?
For everything.
For everything. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is a scoop, but
What?
I was looking on IMDb, the
Oh, yeah?
movie website, and saw that your last novel is going to be turned into a movie. May We Be Forgiven. Can you confirm that?
Well, it's not a scoop. Everything is supposed.
Too bad.
Again, in literature, it's very funny because as soon as your book comes out, they go, "When will it be a movie?" And you think it's just a book. They're not they're not the same. It is in process. We are working on it. We have yet to have a script that we like, so we're trying to figure that out. They're all poking along.
Are you going to work on a script?
I don't think I'm the most qualified person to. I think when you spend 7 years writing a novel, the terms of film and storytelling are very different. So I don't think I'm the one to do it.
But you do a lot of television.
I do.
So
yeah, I know.
And you did the adaptation for Jack.
I did write Jack, and I did do a draft of another one. That's all I said.
So
I
you're
swear to you, I'm not the right one.
Okay.
You know how you know your own shortcomings.
Mm.
It's really hard to do. What Guy and his team have done is amazing, because it's a very long, dense book, and movies are only like 2 hours. Even the play was longer to start with.
Yeah, it's difficult. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Iowa Writers Workshop.
Yes.
You went to it. It's a legendary. You went there in the late 1980s. And as I said, for me it sounds mythical. The place where writers like Raymond Carver, David Foster Wallace, and Dennis Johnson went. How important was it for your writing?
I just want to point out, you said Raymond Carver, Dennis Johnson, David Foster Wallace. Think about the quality of their lives. So you're talking about 3 people who had very complicated lives. That's because Iowa, which is in the middle of America, is like being on the inside of a thermos bottle. It's like whatever your water bottle is, it's like living in your water bottle.
Wow.
So everybody there knows everything about you, the things you don't know about yourself, and they tell each other, she just left the house. She's walking down Johnson Street. It's very intense.
Yeah. But your classmates were Jonathan Franzen, David Foster Wallace, right?
No. Dave Wallace never went to school there.
He just visited.
Franzen also never got a master's degree. No. These are all lies. No, my classmates were people like Catherine Harrison, Colin Harrison. They weren't married at the time. Ann Patchett was a classmate. Lucy Greeley. Tons, and I mean, it's just tons of people.
Yeah.
And Angela Carter. It was the one time she came and taught in America, and I had her as a teacher.
Okay.
Yeah.
I read that somewhere you said the young male writers in Iowa were overly competitive, and you felt little in common with the female writers in Iowa. Were you an outsider there, you think, in Iowa?
I think I might have just been talking in general. No, in Iowa, I mean, the whole place is an outsider place. I mean, the one funny thing I'll say is, so I had lived in New York City, and I really like going to, theater and culture. So I bought tickets for everything that happened in Iowa. So I literally saw like Marcel Marceau. I would go see anything. I mean, literally, I was like that, just desperate. It was strange. I've never been in a place that was not just so white, but it's also where like cereal comes from, and two things: cereal and toothbrushes, which I don't even know how they're made out of the same materials. And we used to just drive around. We would drive like in circles, but they drive like 100-mile circles to just, kill time.
We have to talk about Nixon.
Sure.
I only knew him from the Watergate scandal.
Yeah.
And the movie.
Right. He's coming back.
But I got to know him better thanks to Harry Silver.
Sure.
And what's your fascination with Nixon?
So I grew up in Washington, D.C., and I think my fascination with Nixon is that as I was a teenager, it was right as Watergate was starting to happen, and it was very interesting also to realize that Washington, D.C., when you're first there as a kid, you don't realize it is the capital of an entire country, and you would not know that from the way people behave. So you would think it was like a small town and Nixon was like the mayor or something, Quite literally, we used to see his kids like shopping for shoes, and we used to go to the White House. It was also before there was security, so like George Pompidou would be coming to speak, and the whole 4th grade would go to the White House and like do cartwheels across the lawn while they're talking, It was just a whole very strange other place, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then Watergate happened, and all of a sudden too, it was the first, those hearings were televised, and everybody's parents was watching them, and it was a big deal.
Yeah. And in your last novel, you actually wrote short stories attributed to Nixon.
Yeah.
Well, how did you do that? I mean, was it?
So in the novel, there are these stories that are supposedly Nixon's short stories, and I just mentally love things like this. So Nixon was a terrible sleeper, and he notoriously stayed up at night writing on these long legal pads. And I thought, well, what the heck was he writing? And I decided he was writing short stories. And then I wrote the beginnings of these stories that are really based on things in Nixon's life. So it's sort of like true to Nixon stories about Nixon was apparently a big drinker, and all of these, his father was kind of abusive, all these kinds of dark stories. And then I thought, oh my God, I'm going to end up with a whole collection of Nixon short stories. Like I have to stop now. And then people write to me all the time. They go, did Nixon really write short stories? Yeah.
You also wrote about another U.S. president, Ronald Reagan, in a
Yes,
short
absolutely.
story called "The Former First Lady and the Football Hero,"
Yeah.
which I really loved. Well, I have to mention him.
Yeah.
Did Trump, in the meanwhile, end up in a short story, or is he
Nah.
too shallow?
He's not my kind of guy. No, the Reagan story was interesting because, again, I was trying to write about Alzheimer's and memory, and I feel like, and this does talk to sort of where America is, I feel like America is uniquely choosing to not recognize not only its own history, but the idea of history in general. And that, because we're like a country with Alzheimer's. And so what's interesting to me, when you're saying, like, on the one hand, you could look at my stories and say that's coming soon to Europe. Europe has always been very conscious of its past and of its history, and that influences the way things are done. And America, in the last 50 years, sort of since the 70s, I think has really veered away from not only its own history, but just its relationship to the rest of the world. So that interests me a lot.
Yes. As I said, your humor is your trademark in your work. I mean, that's what I think. Do you think in general that there should be more humor in literature? I mean, a lot of writers are so serious.
Yes.
It's the same in Holland. Everybody's so
Right,
serious.
yes.
Should there be more humor in novels?
Well, the secret is, if you can make people laugh, you can even be more serious. Because I think that the breaking of the surface by causing a laugh, that some kind of recognition or, awareness of something then allows you to kind of go in deeper. Because fundamentally, despite that I'm funny, haha, I'm very serious, and I'm worried, and I care about these things. But I feel like it's also, I want to make people think, but I also want to entertain them and you know, I think this is all we have as far as we know, so we better enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What else?
Yeah. Okay, final question.
Yes.
I
How
want to talk.
am I doing on the test? I feel like I got 2 wrong at least.
Yeah. So I want to talk about your work routine.
Yes.
Haruki Murakami, he gets up at 4 in the morning when
Yes.
he's working on a novel. After 5 or 6 hours, he goes jogging and then listens to jazz, music, and then drinks beer all day. So how do you do it?
I get up at 4 in the morning.
As well, yes.
I'm never asleep. So okay, I'm even better than Murakami. I'm never asleep. You can call me day or night. You can ask anyone in my family. I'm always awake, which is a problem. So I do get up very early. I like to go to work very early. I teach, and I purposely teach very early. So I would say the part I don't do is I don't go jogging. I should. I don't drink beer. I eat chocolate. That's it. Pretty much we're the same. I don't know.
Okay.
You know, I would say I desperately try to get work done, and I
you
do
work a
whatever
lot.
I can.
You do a lot and you work a lot. Very productive as a writer.
Well, I don't feel that way. I mean, I feel like I do a lot of volunteer work because I sort of believe in that, and I teach because I sort of believe in that, and I write TV because you get great health insurance, which we don't otherwise have.
Yeah. You
And
also
then-
said that it's more fulfilling to help people than to write. That was interesting for me.
Yeah, that's a problem. The running joke in my family is I don't say no, and I have to practice saying no. But I care about the world. I care about the people living in it. So, you know, that matters a lot to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Because I have many more questions, but we're running out of
We
time.
can talk
so,
whenever you want.
Yeah. So I'm looking at the audience.
They look
Are there
pale.
questions for AM from the audience over there?
Hi. I just wanted to say that this book will save your life is also one of my favorite books, and I love it so much. And I had a question about a short passage, which is my favorite part of the book, which is where Nick goes to Fred for the first time. Sometimes you think you can't do things for people you should do things for, including yourself, but you can do them for someone else, a stranger. Fred is a stranger, he is my stranger.
Yeah.
I found it really interesting that Nick does it because he's such a famous person and he doesn't really need to do
Right.
it. Did you choose him specifically to have that moment?
Did I choose him specifically because he's a famous person? No, I think I really fundamentally believe that you can do things for other people that they can't do for themselves and that you can't do for yourselves. And I would say it sounds odd, but it gives me enormous pleasure to secretly do something to improve someone else's life, and they never have to know that I did it. That to me is I know it sounds weird, that's my idea of a good time. I know, it's strange. And I do weird things. I sort of adopt people that don't ask to be adopted. No, I'm totally serious. I recently have I've adopted 2 people that hardly know me, and I'm like, I'm gonna help you get into college. And they're looking at me like, who are you? And are you creepy or what? I'm like, no, really, I got it covered. And one of them I just did, which is kind of amazing. It's an incredible story. And I have to say, it's somebody I've never met. This is, because it gives me, I can't tell you how much I love it. A girl who was in South Africa, a young South African girl, who had a terrible family situation and was involved in some after-school arts program. And she was showing up regularly because that's all she had in her life. And the people running the program realized that she was really in danger. And to be a young girl in South Africa is not a great thing. No. And they were able to get her to the US, and she was living with a family in North Carolina. And it was time for her to go to school. And this private school in North Carolina had never had to get a South African girl into college in America, which also meant she needed a full scholarship and all this stuff. And I thought, I'll help do that. I still have not met her, but I got her into her #1 choice school, and I'm so excited for her. But that weirdly makes my day. And then there's another kid I'm working on now named Melvin, in case anyone sees him, who I met just touring schools, and I thought, I love this kid. And I'm like, Melvin, how are we going to get you to school? So I mean, that's the small stuff. But I have to say that means as much to me as anything else.
How old is Melvin, by the way?
Melvin is I don't know. he's 16.
16. Okay.
He's going to be 17. So he's going to be a senior next year. And he has to start, the whole routine of how do you look for colleges. And if Melvin has a single mom and little brothers and sisters, So his mom not only has no money, she can't take off work to go looking at schools for him. And Melvin's this incredibly bright, just adorable, great guy. I'm like, someone's got to help Melvin get to college.
That's
Take
you,
her-
yes.
But, yeah.
Any other questions?
If anyone needs help, just email me.
Just call AM. Yeah.
I never say no. It's unfortunately true, but yeah.
Any hands? Any people who want to ask questions? I have some questions.
Sure.
but let's wait.
My running joke is if you don't ask questions, I'll ask you questions.
Go ahead, Murat.
Okay. When I was a teenager, I had a lot of pen pals, especially girls. One in Sweden and one in Australia.
Yeah.
And I wrote very long emails and really enjoyed it. And it triggered something inside of me. I think the urge to write. You also had a lot of pen pals, famous ones too. Pete Townsend of The Who, Joan Sales, the film director, Quentin Crisp. Is that when you started enjoying writing?
No, I was already writing. I wrote, so I had this strange habit as a child, one of my many strange habits, and I wrote letters to people, but you couldn't really write letters to strangers because that would be weird. I found your name in the phone book, and I thought I'd say hi. And I think I was really just trying to write my way out of my family's house. So I'd write letters to well-known people, but I didn't say like, oh, I think you're so great or you're so cute. I was like, today at school was terrible. So-and-so was mean to me.
Yeah.
And so I had these ongoing correspondences, and it was interesting. I would sometimes write to women, and women would write back, at best, thanks for your letter, goodbye. And men would always write back these very long letters, and I think part of it is people's sense of safety, that women were more sort of suspicious, oh, this person's going to sort of stalk me in some way, and men were just by nature, I think, a little more like, I got it, it's not a problem. And so I had these wonderful pen pals, and I think about it now and sort of on the dark side of the world we live in, that could have been really problematic.
Yeah.
And, you know, they had a lot of sort of, not influence in some ways over me, and they were all incredibly nice and generous and supportive of my early life as a writer and wanting to literally like get out of my parents' house and, you know, and it went on for years.
And you went to Europe as a young girl, right? To England and I think Paris?
Yeah, well, I did. I went to Europe by myself at like 15.
Wow.
I know, it was very
Adventure.
odd. But yes, very
Yeah.
odd. I spent the day like walking around Paris. Hello.
Bonjour.
Bonjour. My grandfather had grown up, I mean, my family had been in Paris since 1900, but I just went because I was like, that's what you do at 15. Taxi! You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you were 19, one of your literary heroes got mad at you, J.D. Salinger.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it was because of a play that you wrote. Why was he so angry?
Well, so I wrote a play as a very young person called The Call-In Hour. And in it happened right after the John Lennon was shot. I found that very upsetting that the guy who shot John Lennon took Catcher in the Rye out of his pocket and started reading it. I thought, that's like a book that means a lot to a lot of people. And so I wrote this play that talks about Holden Caulfield as a real person who Salinger met on a train, and that Salinger sort of stole his life, and now Holden Caulfield's going on a radio show. It's telling people, get on with your lives, don't cling to this. And in that way that you only do when you're a child, I sent it out all over the country, and it won an award. And then everyone thought, like, who is this A.M. Holmes? And everyone thought I was some old man who'd won this award. And I showed up, I'm like, hi! You know, I think I had to get my dad to drive me or something. I'm like, hi, I wrote that play. And they just looked at me like, uh-oh. And Salinger was not pleased.
No,
And the interesting thing was, I didn't use anything of Salinger's work. I didn't, you know, there was, and everyone said this is a fascinating area of sort of intellectual property because is Holden Caulfield a public figure, which they would probably say he is at this point. So you can give him a voice, you can do all kinds of things with him, and certainly Salinger was a public figure. But my goal was not to piss off J.D. Salinger.
Yeah, because you were shocked, right, that he was pissed.
The whole thing was very upsetting for a child.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Exactly.
But he was a very private author, of course, everybody knows.
Absolutely, yes.
And did you ever talk to him on phone, maybe, or did you meet him?
No, but then all this stuff comes out about how J.D. Salinger wrote all these letters to young girls and so on. So I'm glad I didn't write him. I would have ended up living in a bunker in like New Hampshire with him. Can you imagine me and J.D. We're both Buddhist. We're both not writing. I mean, it would have been like the worst female adolescence ever. No, I didn't write him. Various people tried to intercede, and it's also those things you don't realize that when Catcher in the Rye came out, they wanted to make Holden Caulfield cereal, and all of this very sort of commercialization of the thing. And he said, "I want my characters to remain flat on the page," and I thought, I understand that in some ways. And I found him a fascinating, troubling character. So now, and it's funny, it's like almost full circle because I was 19 then, and now in the new book is this story, National Cage Bird Show, which is the, sort of conversation with for Esme. It's the first time I've sort of publicly talked about Salinger or gone back to Salinger since. Thanks for bringing it up. Since then, no one else ever asks.
Okay.
Yeah, that's okay. It's fine. I'm teasing you.
We talked a little about television, but you wrote for the L Word. How was that?
That was fine. There's actually Kathy Greenberg, who created the L Word, is sitting right there.
Okay. Wow.
But anyway, it was. I wanted to work in TV, and there's this catch-22 where you're not allowed to work in TV unless you've worked in TV, which didn't make sense. So and Kathy wasn't even there at that point, but when they were working on the show, I emailed them and I was like, "Hey, I want to come work on your show." And they were like, "Oh, yeah, Mom wants to work on a show." Oh. I was like, "Yeah." And then my friend said to me, "What makes you think you can do that?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And they said, "What makes you think you can go write TV?" And I said, "What makes you think I can have a job where you have to sit up all day?" And that was the thing, honestly. I was like, I slouch all day long. I'm like a writer. I'm like, whatever. And you have to be awake the whole day. And the funny thing is, I loved it. They bring you snacks. You're not alone. I made them buy those big rolling balls so we wouldn't hurt our backs. It was good. So I actually had, and the crazy thing at TV is you make it up and then like a week later they film it.
Wow.
And it's just like, and they make up things like, then they get on the private plane. And all of a sudden, like a week later, you're like, "Where'd you get the private plane?" They're like, "We rented it." I'm like, "I'm not paid enough." It's fun. It's very fun.
Yeah,
it's fast. It's nothing
fast.
like writing a novel. Yeah.
It's a big difference, yeah.
Totally.
You said in an interview, are there any questions?
Yes.
Oh, there's one there.
About how music has influenced what your inspiration.
How music has influenced my inspiration.
I'm sorry, that's a huge.
That's a huge thing. It's influenced me in lots of ways. So there would be I would say, I think the book In a Country of Mothers was entirely written to Miles Davis' Shades of Blue, which meant that I listened to it about 50,000 times, just with the repeat thing. So on the one hand, it's entirely in my head at all times. And actually, Music for Torching is a Billie Holiday album. But nobody seemed to realize that that's where that title came from. And then the other piece of it is the real way it influenced me is I wanted to be in the Rolling Stones. And there are no vacancies and no girls. So it really influenced my writing by just making me have to stay home and write. Because the band was just not an option. So, yeah.
I'm looking at the audience. There's one. Yeah.
My question is, what's the mood in America today?
Today, well, let's see, it's what time is it? It's 3 p.m. now. Confused. I would say the mood in America is confused and foggy. I think it's hard to know because I would say the other thing that's super interesting is right now there are many Americas within America. So it really would depend on where you're standing and who you're asking. I think some people have the fantasy that Donald Trump will somehow, gold plate their trailer home. I'm not really sure, but that somehow he will, invent jobs that have been gone for 30 years and give them the lifestyle that they think he has, which is basically plated is very different from solid. So I think there's that aspect, and then for a lot of other people, I think it's like that commercial where the person was listening to music and their hair was blown back, and they're like, I think it's we're sort of speechless. I mean, it's like it's astounding, and nobody knows what's going to happen next. And I think it is the idea that we have a reality show real estate mogul who went bankrupt, and they decided he was worth more by not actually bankrupting him, but by letting him stay, it's a mess. And that we elected him as president tells you a lot about America that I've yet to write about yet, but it's very worrisome. It's, this is a country, it's not a reality show. And why has no one said to Donald Trump, you're fired? I mean, why don't the American people not just stand up and go, you're fired? I'm hoping to organize that when I get home. Now they won't let me come back, though, so I'll be just staying here.
They know you said that.
Yes, exactly. The airline knows. I'm sorry, Miss Holmes, we've canceled your flight. And your credit card, and everything else.
Are there any other questions from the audience? There's one over there.
I'm loud enough. What is one of the biggest obstacles for you as a writer?
Writing.
As an artist,
Yeah.
we all have our obstacles. So.
No, I'm being really literal. I think writing itself is peculiarly hard. And the strangest thing, and I remember Grace Paley told me this when I was a child, it doesn't get easier. Every time you finish a book, they don't go, oh, now you're the senior vice president of books here. They kind of go, and now you start again at the very beginning, at the bottom of the pile, and you hope you learned something that might apply, but you also raise the bar for yourself. So every time you try to do something, it's all different. So just plain old writing is the biggest obstacle. And then the second obstacle is having the time. I mean, you really have to go sort of deep into your mind to pull something out of it. And I would say that's the problem with a lot of work that's not so in-depth, is that they only went halfway in, and I like to go really far, which means there's a lot of travel time taken up. I think a good day for a writer is like time traveling, and I always come back out and I go, what season is it? Like I look outside and think, what are they wearing coats for? I'm totally serious, because you lose track of time and space, and that's a good day.
Yeah. I have a final question. Book sales are under pressure worldwide.
It's not my fault.
It's not your fault. No. It's not your fault. But how do you see the future of the novel? There's much debate about that. How do you see the future of the novel?
Well, I wish I knew. I think that the fact that the novel has existed for a very long time, I think actually, when somebody first gave me a Kindle, I had like an anaphylactic allergic reaction. And I'm not kidding. And I was like profoundly insulted. What are you giving me this for? This is everything I don't believe in. And I gave it back. And then like a year later, I'm like, that Kindle you gave me? Can I borrow it? I think that things like the ebook have brought a different kind of reader in. I think things like the world that we're living in some ways, the desire to be comforted by stories, I don't want to say that true or not true stories, but by fiction, by literature, is very real. And so I think as much as everybody I know now is turning the TV off and going back to reading. So I'm okay with it.
I discovered your work through an ebook.
Did you?
Yeah, I downloaded a preview and I was reading, this is going well. And then the preview ended and I had to buy the book. I thought, am I buying the ebook now? Nah, I'm going to the bookshop and buy the book. So,
but also that they can tell, Amazon or whoever you bought it from knows exactly how much you read and where you skipped.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding. They know all of that information, and they design books differently now based on what they know about how people read fiction and nonfiction. There's more going on than we.
They know everything.
They know everything. Hi.
Thank you, AM.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, AM. Thank you, Murat Isik. And Murat, I really, really, really hope you get the Libris Prize on May 7th.
Thank you.
Yes.
Also, thank you to Matter of Taste for hosting us in this wonderful venue so reminiscent of Henry Hudson. Thank you to AM's Dutch publisher, De Bezig Bij. And a special word of thanks to our partner in this wonderful enterprise, Toneelgroep Amsterdam. and to Guy and to Elko and to your whole team for putting on the play and therefore making it possible for us to all be here to speak with you and to hear you and to talk with you as well, Guy. AM will be signing books downstairs. Murat's book is also for sale, and maybe if you drag him into a corner, he might be willing to give you a signature as well. Some of our upcoming events on April 24th, we have the Stanford Professor of Virtual Reality, Jeremy Bailenson, coming. Really looking forward to that. On May 5th, we're doing a first of its kind event with Film Institute. Their theme this spring is 1968, which to my amazement is now 50 years ago. How did that happen? And part of the theme is an event that we're doing together to look back on the Vietnam War and the protests against the Vietnam War. So May 5th in we'll be looking back on something which is a huge part of America's legacy. And on May 24th, an event in our technology series, Andrew Keane, with who is very critical of the internet and I think whose work has become more and more topical as time has gone on. So I'm looking forward to seeing you at these events. Come back soon, bring a friend, and join us downstairs in Stuyvesant for a drink and toast to AM and Murat's new prize and AM's new book. Yay!
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Oh yeah. Sorry.